Hi, everyone. This is Summer Gathercole, the facilitator of today's webinar. This is a 12-part series that is sponsored by Work-Life Partnerships on innovative work and practices. And this is where we're really highlighting some non-traditional methods of incentivizing employees. So today's webinar is focused on Namaste Solar and the variety of ways in which they have engaged their employees, as well as how they've supported them through things like transportation subsidies. We're going to hear a little bit about kind of their thinking behind why they decided to provide all those types of supports to their employees, their challenges, and words of advice for those of you who want to try to replicate it. A couple of logistics to just tell you a little bit about today's webinar before we jump in. Everybody is on mute. So that is just to eliminate the background noise. If you have questions, which we definitely encourage you to ask, please go ahead and post them in the chat box. We will be monitoring the chat box throughout today's webinar, and we'll be sure to ask our presenter those questions at the end of the webinar. We also want to encourage you to complete the survey. So when our webinar is done, you'll be automatically sent to a survey that takes about 1 minute to respond to, and if you stick with us to the end and give us those survey results, we will choose one person to receive a $15 gift card to Amazon. So today we are truly lucky to be joined by Blake Jones, who is the co-founder of Namaste Solar. He is a true entrepreneur. He launched this company in 2004, and over the years it has received many accolades, including Best Places to Work, the Most Democratic Workplace, Top Small Business of the Year, Best Overall Company of the Year, and the list goes on and on. If I were to tell you all the awards that they've gotten in the recent couple of years, we'd be here for the next hour. So what I think most exciting about that is there's a lot that we can learn from Blake around kind of how he's been able to engage his employees and why it's been so successful. So we really appreciate him taking the time to talk with us today. And with that, Blake, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Hello, everyone. Again, my name's Blake, and let's see if I could change the slides. Yep, I can. So Namaste Solar we're basically a glorified electrical contractor or construction contractor. We do consulting, we do design, installation of solar electric panels on the rooftops of homes and businesses, hospitals, things like that. We're about 13 years old. Last year we did over 50 million in revenue. And although we're based in Colorado, we also have offices in New York and California. We are an employee-owned cooperative, and out of our 165 people, about 3/4 of us are either what we call co-owners or employee owners, or what we call candidates, and that's somebody who's in their 1-year candidacy program. It's a path to becoming an employee owner, and our goal is to try to have less than 1/4 of us, less than 25% of us, be, quote, normal employee, unquote. In terms of the types of job roles that we have, almost half of us are electricians or electrical apprentices, people who are installing solar panels, wire and conduit, connections to rooftops. A lot of folks who come to us do have electrical experience, but some are other types of tradespeople, carpenters, roofers, plumbers, from various different construction trades. And then another almost half of us are sales people, bookkeepers, people in the marketing department, things like that. And then maybe 1/10 of us are what we call team leads, which might equate to a manager in a conventional company. Let's see. We have 3 important principles I wanted to share. We call them the pillars of co-ownership. The first one is cooperative ownership. It's a very democratic form of employee ownership, whereby only employees can own our voting common stock, and they can only own 1 share. So 1 person, 1 share, 1 vote. I'm a co-founder, but I only have 1 of those shares, the same as any of our other co-owners. Democratic decision making is also another pillar. We don't decide everything, democratically. We have a lot of votes that are empowerment votes for team leads or empowerment votes for committees, which I'll talk about later. So we don't vote on everything, but a lot of things that we do vote on, it's done democratically. And then the third pillar is extreme transparency, another important democratic principle. And in our company, there are no company secrets except for HIPAA-protected information. So everyone knows each other's salaries or wage level. Every meeting is open. All books are open. Anyone can see any company information when they want to, and we proactively present it to employee owners on a regular basis. Some other example business practices are, with our compensation, we have a pretty flat compensation structure whereby the highest paid person can't make more than 6 times the lowest paid person. We call that a total pay cap. We give ourselves 6 weeks of paid time off each year. With community giving, our employee owners voted to give 10% of our after-tax earnings to local nonprofits, and we've donated almost $1 million of our employee owners' profits since we started. And then environmental stewardship, I won't go over those, but we try really hard to walk our talk, and that's a big morale booster, a big source of pride for our employees that we do that. Employee perks. Sorry, this slide has a lot of information on it, but I'll go over each bullet point one by one. Professional development is very important in our company. We have pretty good age diversity, but we have a lot of young people, and it's important to them that they see a career trajectory, and they love that we offer training classes, particularly for electrical apprentices. It's after hours, so it's unpaid time. Usually the classes are once a week, maybe for 4 hours at a time. They can attend remotely via online or at a classroom, and they've got to pay for their own books, and they've got to commit to attending outside of hours. These classes are about $500 per person per semester, and the books that the employees have to pay for are usually around $300 to $400. So it's a significant, almost a matching investment on their side for buying the books and for spending the time. But these electrical apprenticeship classes really help people to learn the National Electric Code and to learn all the theory behind the electricity and what they're doing on a day-to-day basis with their hands. And we've noticed that our test results when they sit for their electrical license went way up when we started providing these classes. We also allow folks, especially if they're not electricians or electrical apprentices, to take other classes. This is not like undergrad or community college or graduate school classes. These are more like a 1-week online course about solar technology or a course on Microsoft Excel. We'll reimburse 50% of the cost of those classes. Usually they're $200 to $250 is what the company is paying on their behalf, and there is a cap for each person per year, and they've got to go through a process for applying for it and things like that. But it's a very popular program. And even more popular than both of those are, we have a lot of internal study groups and study sessions. There are multiple tests that people can take, such as the electrical licensure exams that I mentioned earlier, but also there are a number of solar industry specific certifications that you can take that add some good prestige and add to someone's their resume, and that makes for a good rung on the ladder of a professional development path. And we have a lot of veterans, master electricians, people who have been doing solar for 10 years or more, which is kind of rare in our relatively new industry. And those veterans enjoy giving. They enjoy teaching, and they enjoy having these study sessions. Sometimes there's only 5 people, sometimes there's 20. Usually they're after hours, sometimes they're during lunch, but they're really well attended, and especially our younger or newer folks in the industry, they love being able to ask questions of our veterans, and they love getting that kind of help preparing to take their tests and to take practice tests and ask questions when they run into difficult problems. A big picture meeting is next. That's what we call the bi-monthly or their every other month all company meetings that we have. They usually last the entire day, which sounds scary to take everybody out of work for an entire day, but we found that they have tremendous benefits that make it well worthwhile to take everyone away from their jobs for the entire day. They're voluntary, so some people do step in and out, or if they have a meeting with a customer, they'll do that. But most people attend the entire meeting, and we review our financial statements. So our finance director is at the front of the room reviewing the financial statements, and during someone's candidacy period, they'll have learned basic financial literacy, but it really helps some people to have it reiterated, to repeat it, to go over the financial statements again and again, just repetition to learn what the different terms are and what a balance sheet is all about and things like that. And we also discuss big picture items and hold democratic votes on big picture issues. Most recently, one of our big votes was on whether or not to move office locations, and we had a task force assigned to come up with different options and present those to the group, and the group voted on them, and that was a really big way to engage everyone. We have an intranet is what we call it, but it's basically like an electronic bulletin board because we have people in 4 different offices and some people who work from home. And that has been really fantastic. We use Yammer. We found that software to be a really good fit, and it's a great way for team members to engage with one another. We allow people to post interesting industry-related articles that they find, but they can also post things like, hey, so-and-so's band is playing on Friday night, who wants to come? Or I'm moving and I need some help this weekend. Can anybody help me move some furniture? And we just see lots of activity on that e-bulletin board. It has been very valuable for us. The next one, perhaps this is the biggest, we call them committees and task forces. A task force is temporary. When there's just a temporary need to make something happen, volunteers will get together and join a task force to do that. Example I just mentioned was we want to look at new office space. Who wants to volunteer to kind of help evaluate that and look at that? Committees are standing committees. They're things that we tend to have over a long period of time. A good example is a 401k committee, or we have a zero waste or recycling committee, and we also have something we call a fund committee. And these committees or task forces, again, they're made up of volunteers from different people throughout the company, and they're given pretty significant responsibility in most cases, as well as budget to do things with. Like the 401k committee makes some pretty serious decisions about which mutual funds, which types of funds will be offered in our 401k program, and which provider to work with. Our fund committee, they've got one of the biggest budgets. They plan our company picnic, our holiday party, but they also plan other things like board game night, or birthday celebrations, or bicycle brewery tours, things like that. So, something like a board game night is pretty simple. The company buys a $50 board game like Settlers of Catan is a really popular one, and it's interesting to see how many people love to show up. We'll usually have a dozen to 2 dozen people on any given board game night. Sometimes it's just cards, sometimes it's poker, and any number of strange board games. When I come, I'm surprised at the universe of board games. But it's a very, very cheap way to allow the fund committee to organize some fun activities that are really popular here. Book club is kind of a separate example, but we've had a book club ever since we started. It started off with us wanting to all read business books together, books about employee ownership or books about the history maybe of different role model companies that we admire, like Patagonia, and we'll read those memoirs of the entrepreneurs or the founders, or we'll read those business books together. But then we started learning that we could only do about one per quarter because people, took them a while to read the book, or even some would only get halfway through. But the discussion was incredibly valuable. So even people who didn't read the books, they would come because they enjoyed the discussion so much. But we transitioned into doing podcasts, which don't cost any money, and even just news articles. When somebody finds a neat magazine article in Inc. magazine or Entrepreneur magazine or Solar Geek magazine, we'll go over those, and those are much easier for everybody to participate. And the podcasts, sometimes they take 20 minutes. We'll do it during lunch. Everybody will eat their lunch while we listen to the podcast together, and then we'll spend the next 40 minutes discussing it. Volunteer days, as part of our community giving program, we also pay, it's paid time for people to volunteer for 501c3s in our area that we want to support. We've migrated over towards having these be centralized so that someone on the committee will organize it and at a local food pantry, and they'll say, yeah, we need 24 people or up to 24 people to come and help, and then we'll put that on the calendar and let people sign up, and if they want to take a day off but still have it be paid to go and work, sometimes it's only a half day at the food pantry, they can do that together with their fellow Namastalians, as we call ourselves. Discounts, we like to give discounts for solar systems for people to put solar systems on their own roofs, so we have a discount program for that. But we also found that the bigger we've gotten, we've been able to broker discounts for gym memberships. If more than 5 Namastalians sign up for a gym membership at the gym down the street, they'll give discounts to all of us. And so some of those happen ad hoc. Some of them are organized through our HR committee. Flex time is very important to our folks. People who work a little more autonomously, they can work the hours that they want. People who work on teams, they need to figure out what works best with their teams, but they can all coordinate when they want to work hours or make sure that we're covered during business hours. So when a customer calls, somebody on the team is always going to be able to answer. Or for like our installation crews, our construction crews, a lot of them like to work 4-10s. For those who aren't familiar with that, that's instead of working 5 days a week for 8 hours a day, you can work 4 days a week at 10 hours a day. And it helps reduce mobilization time, because when we're going out to a customer site, we're able to spend a longer amount of time there doing work, but also love it for, say, ski season. That if there's a big snowstorm on a Tuesday, that install crew can all go skiing on their own or together or whatever. They would be able to get up on the roof and work anyway, but then as long as they're working the other 4 days of the week, they can get their 40 hours, and they really like that. Comp time is what we call it. Comp time is for salaried people, and it's if they're at a conference and they're working really long hours. If they work, I think the cap is, you have to work over 50 hours, and if you work over 50 hours, you can take some other hours off because you worked really hard for a condensed period of time, or maybe we had a special project that required people to work on a weekend, and comp time requires you to get what we call peer review from other peers to approve it. But if you get it approved, you can take comp time. We have what we call flex workstations. We allow people to work from home. Our IT department goes through a lot of trouble to help make sure that people have the tools they need to work from home. But we also allow people to, like, raised desks are a popular thing right now. So people are with these little kits that we have, they're raising their desks and raising their chairs so that they can have a standing desk, which sometimes they can sit on a higher stool, or they can stand up because someone sent around an article talking about the benefits of standing desks. And then last but not least, we have unpaid time off and leaves of absences. So when someone wants to go on a big trip, or they get married, or maybe they've used up all their paid time off, they can apply to take unpaid time off, or they can apply to take a leave of absence if they want to do that. Let's see. Some examples that I wanted to highlight were around transportation. As part of wanting to practice what we preach, we're a company that's very focused on the environment, on solar energy. We early on we started giving everybody free bus passes, not just so that they could commute to our offices, which are on bus lines, but also so they could use them, personally on weekends. And there are good buses that go to the airport here and things like that. And there's a good deal with the local bus company that if you get a bus pass for every single person in the company, it actually comes out to a pretty cheap rate per person. So we've been doing that for a long time. And we also have encouraged people to bike to work. And something that we've learned is that we need to have good bike racks outside, but also inside. Some people are very particular about their bikes, and they've got nice bikes, or they've got expensive bikes, or they just refuse to get a lock for some reason, and they want to be able to park their bikes indoors. So having good bike storage inside and outside has worked really well for us. But even despite this, at both of our offices in Denver and Boulder, Colorado, we have a big parking problem just because of where we're located. And it can be, our parking lot gets full. We don't want to park, right across the street in front of the other retail businesses because it angers them or frustrates them when they see that we're taking up a lot of those parking spots. So we got our team together and said, what can we do about this? And someone came up with the idea of, why don't we pay people to not park anywhere within a 4-block radius of our office? They can take the bus, or they can bike if they want, or they can just park 4 blocks away and walk here. And that committee came up with the idea. They brainstormed it. They found out the amount of money that would need to be given in order to get the appropriate amount of people to sign up, which at our Boulder office, which has about 50 to 60 people working here, we have about 18 people enrolled in that. And that was more than enough people to relieve the pressure on our parking lot. And they're getting an extra $10 a month, which is a pretty cheap solution to solve the problem. And it's been in place for a year, and it's working really, really well. And in addition to being a cheap solution, one of the beauties of this is that it all came from a group of conscientious team members who brainstormed and came up with the solution on their own. So that's a fun example I wanted to highlight. Next, we get great feedback from our folks on the different things that we provide. There's no doubt that our employee owners would like more. And there's always talk of paid sabbaticals and can we afford to help people pay for college or for graduate degrees, things like that. But we're a low margin company and we don't have a lot of money to spend. So although those ideas regularly come up, our team is really happy with the ideas that we have come up with to make this a fun, great place to work that don't cost too much money. And some of the ways in which we know this, in addition to just hearing the anecdotal feedback, is we can tell through like attendance. The committees, the board game night, the book club, the volunteer days. You can see pretty clearly that when a lot of people show up, that something's working there and that people are enjoying that. So that's an easy way we measure the impact. Another way is we have surveys. We do lots of surveys. We use Yammer, our intranet, to do a lot of informal polls, and any employee owner can set up any poll they want and just try to get people to fill it out when there's a question, and we're trying to gauge how many people agree with it or disagree with it or want to go to the left or go to the right. We do have an anonymous all-company survey where we ask a lot of different questions about how we're doing on different things, and that's very valuable. Voting is a very important way to measure the impact. You can just see if people, do you want to keep this policy or do we want to change it? And seeing what the voting results and what the voting turnout is helpful feedback. Electrical licenses, the number of people we have who successfully go through our electrical apprenticeship trainings and classes and successfully pass their test and with a really high passing rate, those are things that we measure and they're very important to us. And then, of course, retention. We have a really high retention rate, over 90% of our co-owners and candidates, which is unusually high in the solar industry. Some of our biggest challenges have been that a lot of things are kind of experimental or they're innovative, and we encourage that to happen, but it also means that some things just don't work out. Someone has an idea for a certain committee or for a certain activity, and there's not good attendance, or there's not enough oomph to keep it going. Then it kind of speaks for itself, and hey, that didn't work out. But we try to celebrate the people trying things out and making it okay for it not to work. And that's all right, just go and try something different. But still, some things don't work out as well as we'd hoped. Another challenge is that, as I mentioned earlier, we have low margins, and that leads to really tight budgets. That can be very frustrating, but it is what it is. And then another challenge that we have, sorry, my mind just blanked on what that was. Please forgive me. I'll see if it bubbles to the surface here. I didn't put it on the slide, which would have helped. But yep, please excuse me. I'll move on. So if other companies wanted to do this, I've got some recommendations, and those are, I think getting a software like Podio is one that we've used, or Yammer, like I mentioned, is a great way to encourage lots of interconnection, lots of intercommunication, and it's a great way to get an idea of what people are talking about, what people are wanting. And you can use those softwares to conduct polls and surveys. We also use SurveyMonkey because it's free and it's really easy to set up surveys. We do a lot of that to solicit opinions, ideas, feedback on things. We do contests. Like one time we wanted to come up with an acronym for our 10 core values to help new people to learn them better. We just conducted a contest, and it was fun to see all the different acronyms that came up, and then we let people vote on the top acronym, and it was a simple thing, but it was fun, and it engaged people, and there's a lot more pride for what resulted because of the process we went through. We do have a lot of feedback sessions, particularly at our big picture meetings, but also at committee meetings and things like that. All those things have worked really well for us, and the more you ask for feedback and really take it to heart, the more you'll get. That can be a double-edged sword. Sometimes you can be overwhelmed with feedback, but we'd rather have more than less. And something we do to try to set expectations with everyone is just because you give feedback doesn't mean it's going to be taken. So we want everybody to understand that, but we also have a good track record of acting on a lot of the feedback and on the ideas that come from our employee owners. I think if you have a track record of an extreme one way or the other, it would be a bad thing. We've got, I think, the right balance of getting feedback and acting on it, and that encourages people to know, like, hey, if everyone's listening, things will happen if I participate in this, if I brainstorm, if I submit ideas. And the volunteer committees, we love those. There's so many problems that need to be solved, and our management team, for lack of a better description, doesn't have time to do them all on their own. And this is a great way of delegating stuff like that and engaging the rest of your workforce and really giving them something juicy to work on. But it's got to go hand in hand with giving them the tools and the budget and the authority to make something happen. You can set expectations saying, we just want this committee to provide 3 options, and then management is going to choose which of those 3 options. That's okay, but just setting the expectations for what it is that they're trying to accomplish, what they're going to be doing, how it's going to be acted on, if at all, is important, and just making it, the more meaningful, the better. The more tools, the more authority they have, the better. And I think that's it for me.
Blake, thank you. That was fantastic, and I have to tell you, I kind of want to come crash your next board game night. So that sounds like it's a lot of fun. And I think it's really impressive, just all the efforts that you've made to really just support your employees in so many different ways. I know one of the questions that came in was if you offer any incentives for childcare. So I'm wondering if you can talk about that for a minute or two.
The short answer is no, we don't. It comes up a lot, but we haven't instituted anything like that. Okay.
And let me ask you this, because I know that before we started the webinar today, you and I were talking, and you kind of shared that offering these kind of supports and incentives and employee perks is something that you had in mind from the very beginning. Like, what drove that? What made you think, as a co-founder, this is something that's really important that we need to incorporate from the very beginning of our company?
Yeah, I think in general, I and the other 2 co-founders, when we started the company, we didn't want everything to be on our shoulders. We didn't want to be the traditional principals or proprietors of a company where we're the only ones having sleepless nights, we're the only ones working the extra hours. It was all on our shoulders, and we're the ones taking all the rewards too, having all the control and making all the profit. We really wanted to share every aspect of the small business ownership experience, not just the good stuff, but also the tough stuff as well. And part of our theory was that the more that other people think and act like owners, the way that we do, the better our customer service is going to be, the better the quality of work is going to be, the more fun of a workplace it's going to be, because everyone's going to be engaged, everyone's going to really, really care, and the more successful we'll be. We thought it would be a competitive advantage. And 13 years later, although it was really experimental at the time and we kind of we're feeling our way through it, it absolutely has been the secret sauce, the secret to our success. And so in general, we just try to think what is the best way for people to feel like an owner so that they can think and act like an owner? How can we make this the funnest, most engaging workplace possible? How can we make it so that it's not, when we do a survey, the anonymous survey I mentioned earlier, one of our questions is rating on a scale of 1 to 10, how often do you want to come to work, or do you feel like, nah, I don't really want to come to work? And we get really, really high risks for people wanting to come to work because it's such an engaging place, because it's such a fun place, because people learn so much here. So I think it's all wrapped into a holistic strategy of just wanting our company to be fun, engaging, and rewarding, so that we can have a fantastic competitive advantage, and I'll enjoy being here, because we do spend a lot of time with our colleagues at work.
That's phenomenal. I'm curious, do you think that can translate to any company in any industry, or do you think it's really specific to the work that you're doing?
I think, while I don't think it can translate to every single company in every industry in every particular situation, I do think the concept can. Some of our business practices, even like employee ownership, I don't think employee ownership is for every company. It's not for every person either. It's a really good fit for a lot of companies, though. And there are a lot more employee-owned companies than you might realize that are out there. But there certainly could be, and I think should be, a lot more, but not a good fit for every single situation. There are some things that I think should be taken in a stepwise manner. A really good example is pay transparency. We get a lot of questions about pay transparency, wondering if, like how do you make that work? How is there not drama? How is there not tons of resentment and just people being really angry? And for us, it's not a big deal. And some of it's because we've been doing it for a long time. But when we have new people who join the company, they're a little bit concerned. They're like, wow, how is that going to work? What's that going to look like? How am I going to feel about this? But when they see everyone else and the rest of the culture, how we're handling it and how well it works for us, it de-energizes it, and it's not that big of a deal. But I would not recommend to a company to try to do that overnight. It's something you might need to work your way towards. Same thing with trying to create an ownership culture or an employee ownership culture. Some of these things need to be done stepwise manner. And I think, too, it's hard to have some of these business practices all by themselves. If you're trying to have a really progressive or open policy in one category, but you're closed and concentrated on a small number of people with other policies, it might not jive, or people may not believe it's real or that it's authentic. So I also think you've got to look at things holistically or systemically and make sure that you've got good balance throughout different parts of your company with how you're approaching things.
That absolutely makes sense. We just had another question come in from someone who said that they have a really hard time getting their employees to give feedback, and part of it is because there's this, it's bilingual, Spanish and English, across multiple levels of the organizations or of the company. And so I'm curious, is there anything that you think is special about how you're able to get your employees to participate?
Yes. I'm gonna brainstorm here. Some of them you may have already thought of. You might have already done them, but just in case, making sure you've got a lot of people who are bilingual or who can interpret is an easy basic. I think making sure we call it a safe space. Making sure there's a safe space for people to give opinions. If someone gives an opinion and other people laugh, or the manager in the front of the room immediately dismisses it or gets defensive about it, that'll quickly shut everybody else up. There's got to be a safe space for people to give true opinions and feedback, and even more than that, you've got to welcome them. You've got to proactively solicit them. You can't just set up the comment box and expect people to put comments in it. You've got to go more than halfway, is what I'd say, in order to meet people more than halfway and trying to draw feedback from them. And when they do, express gratitude. Make sure that there are positive consequences, not negative consequences. And what I alluded to earlier, one of the positive consequences is that you can act on it. Now, you can't do that every single time, and you do want to set expectations that's not going to happen every single time, but the more you do act on it, the more you do incorporate it, the more you take it to heart, the more that'll encourage other people to speak up, because they're seeing that makes a difference. That there aren't any negative consequences. There's nothing bad's going to happen to them for saying these things or for speaking up. And actually, in fact, we're helping once they see that they're starting to shape things, it'll come a lot more regularly. And I think that can take time. Even go to the point of training your managers on it, or having specific meetings where that's what you talk about, and giving each other feedback on how a manager, I know what it's like to get really pointed feedback. Our democracy is not afraid to give it, and I catch myself getting defensive all the time, and I rely on other people to help me have that, increase my self-awareness so that I don't get defensive, and I don't say something curt to someone who gave me some tough feedback that they needed to hear, or a neat opinion or idea about how the initiative that I'm trying to garner support for isn't a good one, and they've got a better one, stuff like that. Hope that helps. That's great, and I think I think that's really great. And I think the thing that I would add too, and just to stress what you already shared, is that idea of, for instance, I used to have an employee comment box, and so every other week or so, I would share with the entire team, here's what was in the employee comment box, here's what we're doing differently as a result, or if we can't do something or we can't address that, here's why. Just so that people know there's that kind of feedback loop to them, so they understand it's just not going into an empty space. Another idea too is, people sometimes find it hard to give feedback in a group setting, even if there's only a few people in the room. Right. You can also encourage people, set up channels for them to go talk in private with someone. And if it makes them more comfortable to go to the HR team, or we have what's called a Harmony Committee, and these people are trained on mediation, they're trained on nonviolent communication and things like that, and they're folks that are well respected throughout the company. People know that they can go to a Harmony Committee member and talk about something instead of going to a group or going to their manager or going maybe to their direct colleagues. That really helps when you have other channels that might make somebody feel more comfortable or comfortable enough to seek out help or give some perspectives or feedback. That's fantastic. Blake, so we have about a minute left for one final question. And so someone asked, what's the makeup of your workforce? So is it college grads, men and women? Are there average ages? Is there buy-in to the generationality? Yes, embarrassingly, we are predominantly white. Maybe it matches Colorado, but I don't say that as an excuse. It's just we are, and we're working on it, but we're not very racially diverse. So I'd say we're 80% white. We're also 80% men, and some of that might be because we're a construction company. But it is what it is, and despite our efforts, we haven't been able to move the needle on either of those fronts very well. Our ages are kind of like a bell curve, with the majority of the people in their 30s. We do have people in every decade, and it's decently distributed, but the majority, I'd say the average age is probably 35 or 36. We have a good number of young people, a good number of millennials, folks who are starting their career here, starting as an entry-level electrical apprentice, things like that. And yes, there are differences between folks in different age groups, and that comes out when we're debating policies and people are sharing ideas and things like that. But we go through a lot of effort to make sure that our culture creates that safe space I talked about earlier, where people can express what they want to express, as long as they do so respectfully and diplomatically, so that nobody gets. We have some heated debates, but they never get unhealthy or disrespectful, and we do have a lot of different opinions from the different walks of life and the different ages that are represented here. The buy-in intergenerationally, I think there's no doubt that in all age groups we have very committed, long-time employee owners who love to be here. So I've not seen anything stand out there. Some people in every generation dig what we're doing, so to speak. That's awesome. I mean, Blake, it sounds like you really have created a really positive, supportive work environment. So kudos to you. It really sounds fantastic. And with that, we're coming to an end of today's webinar. I just want to thank you for taking the time to be with us today, to share everything that you're doing at Namaste Solar. It's really, really impressive. So really, seriously, thank you for your time. For those of you who have joined us in the webinar today, just want to encourage you to complete the survey. As I mentioned earlier, one
One respondent will receive a $15 Amazon gift card. And then finally, just want to encourage you to join us for our next webinar. It's September 14th at 11 a.m. Mountain Time. And we're going to be hearing from Hot Chicken Takeover in their non-traditional benefits and how they've led to higher retention. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Blake, and we hope to see you next month.